assuming they can see me and they should be able to hear me. If someone's watching this and they put things in the chat, I'll know that someone saw me. I don't know if watching this, but picked up. Well, thanks, Tony. Hello, everyone. As we're getting started, there's a massive QR code on the screen. If you want to follow along, that has a bunch of stuff you can check out during the presentation. If you want to explore more on your own, there's a bit more info. There's entire slides, the music scores, and a few pictures and diagrams that didn't quite make it for that on your own. Anyone watching online, I believe the link is there. If not, I'll post the description after this. There'll be a moment for questions at the end. Anyone watching online, if you want to put that in the chat, I'll answer them. But at a time, I'll respond to your messages. So, welcome everybody. My name is Matthew Bardin. You're not here to hear my lecture recital where we're exploring the Cyberinet instrument I've created. In the wrong spot, but please don't go because I like seeing. Basically, what we're going to be doing today is kind of exploring a little bit of what it is I've been working on, context, everything. And with that, we're going to hear a little bit of music spread around. That being said, it is after 7. Right. So, what is Cyberinet? It is an augmented. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the context of what an augmented instrument is. Basically, why should I care about this, essentially? A little short history. For the most part, an augmented instrument has been altered or essentially improved in some way of the previous context. So you have regular, let's say an acoustic guitar, and add electric pickups to it. You've turned it into an electric guitar. You've augmented it past what kind of the mindset we're going with. There can be tons of ways to do this. It can be mechanical, adding new acoustic, electronic, tons of different ways. The main core of that is that you increased the capabilities of previously. You haven't done it. It's not a completely very fine line there, but that's splitting hairs. Person has their cut off. Just to kind of give a little historical context, might be a little hard to see at the bottom, but a few ideas, general time to think about, and these are all very generalized here. We're not here to learn about brass mutes. We're here to learn about the Cyberinet. These are just a few of the kind of augmented. I like to think augmented. Prior to the 20th century, that's a very long time frame. But I like to think of brass mutes as a kind of a very early to think of conceptualized example of augmenting instruments. Way over on the far side of the stage from me, that's Orfeo by Monteverdi. That's not the very first piece, a very, very, very early up with significant brass in the beginning. During this kind of blank section of there was a lot of stuff happening there, but if I put every single the main thing is continuing to develop new instruments, expanding previous ones, kind of exploring. We really see this idea of augmentation start to take off about the 20th century as electricity and products and everything begins to become a little bit more developed, a little bit more commonplace. This is when we begin to see things like the audio effect pedals, if you are, the amplification I mentioned, forward and playback things. All this begins to come about. And I've got kind of in this timeline some music things related to that, some non-music, and hopefully give a little bit of text if it's hard to see. Time moves on into we begin to see things kind of a little bit more computer-based. Computers become more powerful, internet exists, things like that, and there's similar aspects to some of being really controlled much more real time, a lot more smaller packages. That becomes a lot more of the in the bottom bullet point listed a handful of other augmented the ones I give a little improved over onto Cyberinet specifically. The name, it's a portmanteau of cybernetic and before we just talk about specifically, I've got one more thing that is cybernetic. Popped up in pop culture a lot, but official definition comes from Greek. Perfect pronunciation. Question that word, captain, pilot, person steering something. The modern context, Norbert Wiener, cybernetic. Basically, science of automatic control. The idea says the idea of a person steering a ship, they're turning a wheel to avoid rocks on the turning the wheel, that turns the boat. They aren't physically turning the boat, they're turning the kind of automated process happening there. Cybernetic process. As time has gone and it's evolved a little around meaning causal feedback in both in biological and non. We later on got the word cyborg. Cybernetic. And that is basically a portmanteau cybernetic organism, inorganic body part. Cybernetic doesn't necessarily mean natural and non-natural combined, but there's that level of role back. This all relates back to the because this instrument select performance data automatic electronic music environment performance. I know bottoms. Other people who've done cybernetic music in it very, very short. Focused in cybernetic music and mix randomized output and intentional algorithm. Right? Computer scientists, computer languages, synthesis techniques, cybernetic. Last one I have. Those are used by you. That's a very, very brief. All of this. Move along and talk about the. So the Cyberinet is built into the clarinet. It collects the various performance data. It does this without impeding the functionality of the clarinet. Have utilizing it over there. It's still clarinet. It still functions just like any other clarinet would. It doesn't offer those cybernetic, that automatic controlling the patches. We'll talk about the specific sensors later, but as the performer moves around or blows more or less air through the instrument, it's automatically used to control the environment. And the performer can respond to that performing sound, and it creates this very interesting feedback loop. I find a very interesting particular. Why would you want to use this if you're a clarinetist? As I mentioned, it's fairly easy to use. It doesn't take away from your clarinet. Very adds harmonic. Very fun clarinet. One note. Some data have the computer by playing. Very intuitive. You don't have to programming. I write music for it, perform with it, improv with it. A lot of different options. Moving on to the next section about how a little bit of making it. This device, this current iteration of Cyberinet, utilizes what's called OEM components, essentially components that are more or less compatible with similar facings of pins. There's a lot of text on the side. Hop over to a picture version of the previous slide. All of the sensors. Kind of working our way, we'll do the top row. Very small LED individually program and have the that's what's collecting the talk about it. One differential pressure sensor, gyroscopic movement as the performer air through the instrument. That's going to pressure side of the tube. It just compares outside environmental pressure to the inside pressure of the tube. That data. A lot of stuff there. I picked the sensors in because I build this to make it accessible. OEM. I have a few prototypes right here. The over on the far left, all of the chips. Actually, it's that different chips. I've also just had to all the things. Final of that. Outs. Fine. Currently, the idea in a second buttons at Cyberinet for performance development. There we just have the main unit. How it happens is affected by you know, experimenting gyroscope way for the Cyberinet. Those are right now have first piece. All of the music you're hearing today are the very first the music written for this instrument. They all utilize a similar kind of core concept. That is, they're utilizing different aspects of the Cyberinet. They aren't erasing the clarinet sound. Augmenting, develop it. Have to see more and more. This particular piece utilizes buttons on the thumb rest of the clarinet, all built up in a performer is press that and microphone on the stage. Both at the same time, effectively created a loop pedal with extra. But as a clarinetist, you don't have a loop pedal that you plug yourself. It allows the player to harmonize and multi-track with bells, which is not a that's just the first stage of this particular one. It's kind of one line and presses on. I don't be able to blind himself. While he's getting situated, I said that he's going to be triggering it with the buttons. Because this is new technology, don't always work how you expect. We discovered the buttons are not working properly. Figure out what that problem is one time. But for today's performances, the things involving the buttons, I'm going to be having to sit over there and manually trigger it. It's unfortunate. But again, with new technology, there's all kinds of bugs and problems. You work it out bit by bit, you develop it, and you get a little bit better at solving stuff. It'll go. Worked yesterday, believe it or not, but we're going to, along with that, and manually do. As we're going, we just need to connect the device to the computer. This is going to, again, be collecting all of the data in the little box on his barrel and sending it via Bluetooth to the computer. I'll talk about how that happens after we hear this music. I'm going to set you up. Make sure I have my cues. Got it. Again, in this one, Sam will be playing, and then it will be recording his sound. It will play it back. He'll be able to harmonize with himself, but it may not sound exactly the same. Leave it. You deserve a break. All right. So in that piece, there was some processing happening. Kind of made the backing tracks as they came back kind of like this, and maybe a little bit of at the same time. The reason for that was a stylistic choice. My initial concept in making this piece was, in addition to wanting to utilize some metal function, to think of walking through a park. Walking through a park, you hear other stuff. Maybe you see something, doesn't matter, but you're still walking through. You have your kind of linear path. As you go through, maybe you hear something else that gives context to what you saw before. What may have sounded like a downbeat was actually an upbeat, so on and so forth. But you still doing your thing. There's all these tangential stories around you, but that's not the most important thing to you. You are the most important thing to you. That's kind of the concept. So that's why I wanted the main clarinet voice to come through all the time, and then everything else is relevant, giving context, but it's a little bit more recorded and back from my intent with that. All night. We're going to get back into assembling the unit. So we've already talked about the circuit board, soldering on all the bits. Sometimes it's more. This is the general process. So basically, I work from smaller to larger in terms of putting the things on those circuit boards. I start with the very small resistors and LEDs. If you give my finger on there, that's that very small LED. That's all of the surface mount onto the connector, AST battery. That all gets by the plastic. It's all of the bigger. There's the microcontroller that get attached to it, adding the power switch into the. All of those are getting right to these circuit boards right there on all those little, very little ones, big circle, white, smaller circle. All of this results what we see very. That is modern. I have a few. I was gonna have a little side, but we really want to. But this results in a very small unit, vertically about 5 millimeters. In the middle, heading off. On the left, housing. Actually, some historical context, computer ideas, some ideas, listen to stuff. Let's actually talk about how the. That's what we're. So, core of the on the instrument, Cyberinet, is that it collects data. First two steps in this. Brains of and that using coding language, the environment that gets all of the data. So refresher. This is what that code on the right side. Buttons saying get it back. Then gyroscope code on our left is a little bit more complex. Once we get that little bit of everything wirelessly in that ESP32. That and you whatever you have that's Bluetooth up to it. There's a software. I think values talk about using them in Macs. All the audio process as far as devices can just label. This is the gyroscope. This that along. Utilize this in any device, any program that can that serial data. One thing I want to do before we get into a little bit forward is take just seconds, but Adam, the person who's using this, focusing again on the ability, flexibility, still short. Very much. Pay you later. All right. So actually, don't sit down just yet. That was kind of the segue to getting you. We're gonna listen to another piece of music. This one is completely different from what we heard before. While the other one, the button used the buttons. This one focuses on the gyroscope and accelerometer. So what this one will do will be playing a single melodic line. This is going to generate a few textures utilizing its gyroscopic and accelerometer position data. Basically, there's some kind of backing chambers noise, nothing crazy, but the also going to be some FM. This essentially is going to be creating a little melodic line that's going to harmonize along with it. It's going to kind of randomly change between different harmonization. The idea with this one, I'll tell you before we hear this, that there is an ethereal presence. There's something else in the space happening as you're creating music. Tribute, whatever, backstory, inspirational, but there's something else. You never just make music by your thought process. This piece of music has no bar lines of any kind. Alternates between faster rhythmic material and longer notes to kind of encourage Adam to experiment a little bit. Play this fast and kind of move over and something happens. You don't like that, so you back off or leave. Very, I want to say open-ended, but it's adaptable. Every performance is going to be a little bit. That being said, get that one started. One doesn't use the buttons, but I still have to connect it all up. it's thinking about. Hello, Internet, while we're waiting. I like to think I do, but no. Okay, now let's. There it is. So you can hear the pitch coming from there, as well as kind of the noise in the background. Those are the two main timbres that we're going to hear. Whenever you're ready. There's going to be one more piece of music, but that'll be happening towards the very end. Kind of one more section to talk about. I mentioned this instrument kind of works in three processes once you get it built. Collects the data, Bluetooths the data, then the computer is the other part of the system. That then you so setting it up, there's a few more steps that it needs to be initially. This is one of the few goals I'm working on that simplifies all of that. So there's a few drivers. Basically, these drivers are just saying, "Hey, this is the microcontroller. Lets everything talk." You don't have this. We found out work. So I personally install it using the Arduino programming environment because you need that to program the device to begin. All of the online materials and instructions kind of walks you through the process. The program Max is also using Node and the Node package manager run just a little script that says, hey, when you get this, get the data, sending it out to Max, kind of managing everything with. You can set all of that up. Once it's set up, and as Adam said, pretty much plug and play steps, extra drivers on. But once it gets through all of that and gets into the computer working in Max environment, and the main goal is to collect, transmit that, utilize it in whatever way you want. You don't even have to use it in Max as a that can read that data. In order to help along with that, I've been utilizing a handful of Max patches. Anyone not familiar with the Max environment, basically program things, set up your little algorithms and their patches of that. But what these are very common audio effects designed to, again, not necessarily transform the clarinet sound, but augment it in a fairly standard way. A handful of them, there's about graphs, about 20. So I have some reverbs, a handful of different delays, things like that. That get the data and as a who may not be a programming expert, put all of this together, that you can say, okay, I'm gonna get the patch that we're gonna look at in the next slide. I want to take the gyroscope. I want it to connect A to B. My personal favorite one that we won't also set lighting. Fortunately, in the piece of music, the lighting controls with the button aren't working. If anyone wants to see that in the future, let me know, but can control MX lighting. And we're going to look at a few Max patches. QR code from the beginning. There's a shot of some more Max patches that we're not going to see. Want to explore that on your or more. That can keep same one from the beginning. Already scanned. On. So, Max patches. All of them have fixed Cyberinet. So that way, when it's all loaded up, you can just type in objects. Very common thing. There's one, the patch. Sorts it out. I have a screenshot of it. The receipt. I've arranged it in a way that just moves from left to right. You just click the buttons, and it all lines up. You basically just have to tell the computer, hey, find the device, open communications. At the bottom of it, you'll see all of the data appear. There's all of the instructions. Moment, all that's the thing that we'll talk about in do this again. Every little outlet of that receipt box represents first three are the gyroscopic data. Second three are the accelerometer. Then we get the two buttons, 1 or 0. Then the air pressure differential, temperature of the room, and it sends out a help. I don't know. All of these values, 0 and 1. Those values are a little oriented. That aren't recent buttons. So it's just 1. Then the temperature in there. Felt a little scale. Look at the temperatures. Stuff that one. Looking side, Cyberinet. Here that in those little messages, hey, start running, connect to the device, data, plug window. And all down the bottom and outlets, values coming from the bottom. I've just connected that's right. I think those are connected to thing. I'm using Macs. You don't have to format it to work native. Different programs could hypothetically control or in another place with the clarity. That's not something we're today. Nutshell, how it all works. Mine is find same QR. Have a repository. All of the things wanting to use repository. That just search Cyberinet. All of it's there. All of it. All of the software patches I've made, circuit diagram. Thing you might possibly need to analyze this lives. I would love it's able to be purchased, but they are open source, so you can make it. Purchase would go toward developing new things and things of that nature. If you're skilled or committed enough, you could create your own online resource. Okay. We have the final for tonight. This one's a little bit longer. It has the most amount of stuff. This is all of the stuff, kind of the quotes around the button. Essentially, the performer is going to be queuing up various sections of song is an analog for the buttons. All the control and process sound coming audio sound ranges. Range from some fairly relaxing ambient noises to some more sounds. And it'll vary a little bit based on how Adam. There's a narrator text by myself. I wrote a little short story. That's the text that you're hearing. That's also real time. Sound like, but not quite. This is where the title of our event is being complex. All of this stuff drops on. There's hear the accompaniment. It'll up certain events. Back with me. So I'm gonna just pair up the Cyberinet again. Top timed out on me. Guess what? I thought, but it's all caps. This isn't my laptop. I only have so many laptops. Okay. Set. Then we
Nine, 10, 11, crack. The storm outside is gradually drawing close. I lay back in my recliner and sipped my tea. The smell of mint combined with the warmth of the fireplace nearby was soothing. After this past week at work, I was looking forward. I decided to take a break from reading and turned on the TV instead. Thunder had startled me awake. I was both a little groggy and confused that I'd fallen asleep so unexpectedly. Long days at work must have worn me out more than I originally thought. He was displaying nothing but static. The storm must have knocked something out of town. At least the power was still on for now. The rain was still coming down as a dull roar on the roof, blending with the static from the television. Glancing outside, I saw that it was pitch black from the storm in the night. It made sense. I'd been out for several hours at this point. I shivered a little and drew the curtains back as the kettle began to boil. Crack! See the lightning, but the thunderclap sounded as if it was right above the house. When I returned to the TV, it was still displaying static.
start that again because something didn't line up right.
Nine, 10, 11, crack. The storm outside is gradually drawing close. I lay back in my recliner and sipped my tea. The smell of mint combined with the warmth of the fireplace nearby was soothing. After this past week at work, I was looking forward to something like another flash of light. 7, 8, crash. The storm was oddly out of season, but not unheard of. Every few years, towns would be flooded by a freak. At most, a few trees get blown over and knock out the power. Maybe a little flooding in the lower areas of town, but nothing that isn't resolved and forgotten for the future. I sat there, drank my tea, enjoyed the solitude and relative silence. Well, this time, the sound of the rain made me preach. The sound grew so gradually I had no idea when it started. By the time I had finished my tea, final chapter of my novel, sound filtered through 2 floors of family history, passed along down at this house, and developed into a dull roar of water droplets on my house's roof. It was constant, yes, the light Nintendo was getting closer and closer. Hopefully this would move past without too much trouble, but it didn't seem to be moving any faster. As the rain was going all night. I decided to take a break from reading and turned on the TV instead. Flash, freeze, crack. The thunder had startled me awake. I was both a little groggy and confused that I'd fallen asleep so unexpectedly. Long days at work must have worn me out more than I originally thought. The TV was displaying nothing but static. The storm must have knocked something out of town. Just the power was still on for now. The rain. Got to the bottom of the stairs and the roar of the rain faded away into nothing. Hopefully, the fact that I couldn't hear the rain down here meant that it was passing by. I began to head in the direction of my emergency lights, annoyed at myself for not getting them out before the store, or leaving my cell phone upstairs. If the cell service would be out, or at least look at a built-in flashlight. It made finding the lamps and fuel easy. Then I noticed there was something in When I reached the top of the stairway, I slammed it shut and leaned against it, panting heavily. The roar of the rain was back, but I could tell that it was gradually fading from what it was before I went downstairs. Maybe it was just my rapid heartbeat blocking out the sound. Still pitch black in the house, but now I was able to look around didn't see. Maybe my eyes had finally dilated more than they were before. I didn't care. I was just glad to be able to. Until I looked around. The house I've been in all my life, but it was different. Maybe that part of the reason it was so dark is that the windows were all boarded up. Layer of dust coated the walls, and all that was there, none of the furniture, pictures remained, shelves were empty. TV and the recliner were no longer in the living room. It was visible through a half-open doorway into the hall. I locked the basement door, took a small cautionary step forward, and immediately went. Looked down at the first again, and my rush, I was apparently saw my mouth and stepped on one of the pieces just like I knew it happened. Because barely bleeding, but it was starting to hurt as my adrenaline was. I was so scared of it. But extra jumpy was like a sleeper. Maybe it was one of those doors, there's no way anything could get in there. I was just about to turn around to the place again myself. But here's the man. I couldn't remember exactly what the thing in the basement was, just that I had to get away. I could feel this thing was right behind the door, and I didn't want to go. I immediately broke into a sprint to the kitchen window since it was the closest way out of there. I didn't care where I ended up as long as I was away from here. The pain in my foot was inconsequential. I ignored it and didn't even notice the small trail of blood following me wherever I went. No other emotions. I had to. No good. The kitchen window was boarded up 2 times. As I hurried to the front door at the opposite end of the house, sure it cut to the living room to avoid the basement. That was also boarded up. I'm trying to get the eye off the board. Rain was just excruciatingly loud. I almost taste the safety. Crash! The basement door broke open with a crack much louder than any of the thunderclaps I've heard so far. Sitting on the door, I immediately ran up the stairs to my left, second floor, knowing whatever it was, only a few moments behind. I wish I had another door to shut me close down for a second. As I ran, I could hear the rain shit. I looked around the second floor. The floor may have been a little bit wider than the ground floor, but it was in no better condition. All the windows were boarded up, and other than a thin layer of the dust, the only thing in any of the main rooms was this large, dark stain on the floor where it once did my bed. It was quickly obvious I would not find a way out of here, so I bolted. Limping slightly from daylight, but I could get to the veranda at the back of the house. I might be able to shoot down the side of the building to safety, assuming I didn't slip in the rain. It had a glass door, so I could use my body to break it open. There was a few more scrapes at this point. Then I ran, I could feel it getting closer, but at this point it was on the second floor with me as I hurried to the door. The closer it got, the more horrified I became. The sound of the rain was almost deafening now, but compared to the entity inside of me, it felt like my salvation. Luckily, when I grabbed it around the door handle, it flew open and I tumbled outside onto the balcony. with miniature bullets was painful, but I barely noticed, and needed to find a way out of this house, out of this neighborhood, out of the entire town. I was looking around for a train pipe, for a ledge to shimmy across my nose. But here, trees only extended through to the hill line, and as far as I could see, they were just gone. At the end of my backyard, the world just seemed to vanish. I couldn't tell if it was simply too dark to see that far, or my house had been teleported to some other dimension. It's black and nothing but a swirling storm cloud, thunder, rain. I suppose, in the end, it didn't really matter.
Thank you very much, Adam. So this last one, just because of all of the effects processing my normal speaking voice, the very, very short version of the story is a person in their house falls asleep in a rainstorm, wakes up, powers out. Go down into the basement and find an eldritch abomination beyond human comprehension. They run up the stairs. Because it was beyond human comprehension, the brain forgets it. They can't remember. They're going looking around, ultimately get chased up to the roof. The thing breaks out, and it's left ambiguous, but I like to think that's the very short version. There's lots of vamping patterns intended to kind of emotionalize the idea of, okay, you're looking for a way out. You're looking for the light. You're going around and around. You don't know exactly where you are. Kind of the feeling I was going for, and then distortion and processing or sounds. And all right, the final thing, again, I've mentioned this throughout of I want to do this, I want to do that. Very much a thing I'm going to be working on after two of the things I want to focus on. And I want to optimize all of this for Windows and Macs. Right now, they work Mac. Moment, we're not going to get in finishing up those expansion units. I'd love to play around, and the thing I mentioned before was OEM, make it accessible. For my aesthetics, I think that box that accommodates all of that a little bit big on the clarinet. So I'd like to play around with customizing it even more and getting everything super small and just to make that footprint a little. Formatting so that all the OSC and sound formatting so that way multiple programs can utilize it a little bit easier, because again, I'm using Macs, it's kind of designed for Macs at the moment, and sent to others. I think to fit along with this idea of user-friendly, tweaking that in the future. I love to experiment with embedding it with Cyberinet, so it's just a little figure that one out. And expanding this to apply to other instruments. I am a clarinetist in addition to composer. People play more instruments than just the clarinet. I would love to expand this idea to get applied to different instruments. Start in the clarinet family, expanding out to other woodwinds. Work at brass. I'm like to have a whole. The last on there is, at the moment, everything just click on it and it connects, but potentially another computer could come in, try to pair with the device at the same time, and that's going to be misconnecting. I want to password that from happening. That would not be a fun time if you're trying to play in your performance and all of a sudden your sounds are going to Jim's phone over there who doesn't necessarily know tapped on. So, final note. Again, all of this stuff is online, and all of the max patches that are used for these compositions are also available. If you want to experiment either with a Cyberinet unit or on your own, you can run this on your own computer, pull them up in go. Everything is on both on the GitHub repo, and so that was a lot of information. I don't want to keep everyone here all night, but this is the time where I'm wondering if you have any questions. If anyone watching the stream of this over here has any questions, again, if you want to just type those in the chat, I'll take a second to look at it. If we run out of time, I'll just respond afterward. Comments. So, yes. Start with the second part of your question first. With the airflow sensor, the idea, this was brought up a while ago, but I haven't included it in the slide. And the idea for sticking with that one, again, it's measuring that difference between the inside and outside of the tube. Playing, you can say, oh, my airflow is constant, it's not moving, fluctuating weirdly. I'm kind of intending it almost as a little educational tool, but that's still a little. That was the thought. It doesn't it's not an exact size. You still need to or air. So in that case, it depends on the use case. It could be a factor depending on how you utilized it once you got it. Computer, scale it up, you could ignore kind of on a case. As for the tooth, basically I didn't want to limit case to anything that needed the Wi-Fi to. I wanted it to be a little bit easier, a little more accessible, and I figured a lot easier to Bluetooth connect anywhere than Bluetooth serial specific library. In the context of that piece, the very first one, the puzzle apart, that was the one where the performer is kind of looping with himself. It was more of I was kind of planning out everything, but I kind of left it very open-ended. By that I mean I wrote the very last repetition first, and that was very flowy. That's kind of like the icing on top of everything else. And I went back in and okay, how am I going to harmonize all of this as where is it what's supporting all of the stuff I came up with inspirational. Yeah, that particular one was a mix because I wanted to make it relatively similar to each other between the parts, so that way Adam or whoever else would be playing it would have a little bit of an easy time just trying to sync up with. That was the main reason I stuck with the syncopation. Thank you. It's a mix of things. I'm not going to scroll back through 7 slides to get back to that timeline, but there's other modern instruments that utilize similar aspects to it, but they're not quite what I wanted to refine it, get the price point down, basically just enhance what some of those were doing and make it specifically for the clarinet being a clarinet player. So with that, for the original kind of inspiration, again, this is, if I was to kind of quote a genesis of it, this would go way back to my master's, where I wrote a piece where I had a camera tracking a performer who was dancing and then responding to sounds, but then sounds would influence the interpretive dance and so on. And that kind of idea of being able to back loop cybernetic concept, that's kind of the ultimate of it, and it evolved in past. So, like I'm saying this a lot, but it's a little bit of finding it, a little bit of so I started with the online 3D modeling program called Tinkercad. Anyone's not familiar, it's just a free to use online modeling software. Download a thing. I was looking at other models of clarinets, but I kind of wanted to make my own, so I got my clarinet barrel and some calipers and got all the measurements right, and then kind of found one with the physical dimensions on the outside that I needed, made sure that the inside was there, and then it was kind of experimenting with different infill settings, deciding how dense, how not dense can it be, and I'm playing around with that, and I found actually more or less the defaults on the 3D printer that I have were kind of that. Yes. I agree. That was probably when designing harder choice. I think for me, it goes sensor choices I make and those patches, kind of those basic. My goal is for multiple people, wide encompassing, by using the sensors that kind of work naturally with physics of playing the clarinet. Again, you're moving around as you're expressing stuff. You're moving air through. Usually got some kind of free hit a button with your thumb, things like that. I got out my instrument when kind of playing it out and thinking, okay, what am I doing? What can I some way kind of get that response? That's great and all, but as you said, you need some kind of response in the end result kind of correlate everything. So that's why I was like, okay, let's make some common audio effects that, for the most part, everyone who's at least programming audio and making at least knows what they should sound like or can find that out. That way we can kind of see the, oh, if I move to the left, the compressor can experiment and play along. Big fan of just experimenting, seeing what you have. Outside of that, I've almost left it a little open-ended to take with it. Oh, okay. So that one, in the score for the third piece, there's the, assuming if I'm misinterpreting this, let me synthesizer parts. So that one I notated because that was generated beforehand, and that's going to essentially be where the buttons working. Adam would have been queuing them up, and that's what I was doing. Click, do. So that way he's queuing up the recorded playback of that, and then processing and giving it kind of that more gritty timbre in itself. So that way, because that part's not changing, notated it as a way to just kind of help everyone more or less stay in sync because of the repetitive nature of the sections. It's not a little off, but just hopefully help Adam figure out where. The other two pieces were a little more nebulous. The very first one, I also did a similar thing where it's recorded what you have played previously, put that under, kind of keep yourself oriented, not get horribly. it, it has changed as I went along. So the very first one I wrote was the ethereal presence, that middle that we heard, the one that has no other information other than here is the clarinet. Thinking, okay, here's I'm crafting that line, and then the other stuff kind of happens. As I moved along, I started thinking, okay, how can we specifically control things? That led to the button triggering of the recordings. And by the time I started really diving in raindrops on a roof, at that point I was thinking, okay, this is a new unique thing. There's parts in the score where I'm indicating with a little symbol. If you all the notes. Okay, move your instrument a little bit more, heavier breathing, in between the stands to affect the gyroscope. I really wanted to kind of push the envelope and lead this in, think of it as its own unique entity rather than just a clarinet with a Austin. The first part of your question might have been a little difficult to see from far away, but there are some LEDs built onto it that you can. There's some holes. Look through it. See is everything on transmitting. Not like a screen or anything that tells you what the specific sensor. Logistically, that outside of needing to find the spot for it, that very tightly filled, bigger power draw and drain the battery faster. This kind of leads into the second point. I almost don't want that, at least me personally. Unless I'm going out of my way to look for it. That's part of my logic for saying, okay, you can see all of the numbers in real time on the computer or not. To scroll back, there's a little toggle hatch. That lets me think as a performer, getting that oral feedback of the sounds, kind of live that moment. I really wanted to see what I was doing on a more technical side. I have the option, but I personally think having much of it potentially bogged down. Play clarinet, but with detecting errors in different spots. Kind of I haven't really thought down that line. Kind of extent of that, I've been thinking kind of the more of an educational tool for how's your oh, I don't know, you move too much kind of, or I don't know. I haven't necessarily thought about it in manufacturing. I placed the instrument on the barrel for a few reasons. Basically, that unit there can rotate 360 degrees around that point. So if Adam didn't like it there, he could put it in a range and go. That is also the closest point to the mouthpiece before you get to any of the holes that affect the tone. So you're going to get a more clear airflow reading compared to somewhere low. I mentioned some sensors that detect kind of how hard you're pressing and kind of some of the pressures. My kind of two thoughts are finding a way to incorporate that either on the key themselves or kind of that back side of the instrument. Not really a lot of mechanical stuff in the way, but moving too much stuff down at the bottom, it tends to get kind of heavy and hard to move. Falls down, and it could also. One thing I do want to play around with though is that I mentioned way back a second motion sensor, but putting it down in the barrel area so you can really drastic changes compared to up. I think I got all those. Anyone else? No, we're probably time for one type something. Not yet. Okay. That's it. Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, committee. No one has anything else. That's that. I'm going to tear down things. If anyone would like to, I will actually, after everything's teared down, be going to the Chimes, which is, if you're not familiar, just write down Highland on the other end of campus. If you want to stay and help me tear down, we can all go over there, and I'll buy one or two of you a beer if you help me. So that's where that is. Thank you all. Thank you all for watching this in the future. I keep forgetting the camera's over here. Everyone have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.